Kitco Mining's special coverage of the Precious Metals Summit in Zurich is brought to you by Vizsla Copper.
Does Dr. Copper need to see the medic? This is Paul Harris for Kitco Mining at the Precious Metals Summit in Zurich in Switzerland. To help me answer this question, I'm joined by John Black, CEO of Aldebaran Resources. John, welcome to Kitco.
Great, thanks.
Now, the macro environment for the copper sector and the copper price continues to be quite bullish, but the copper price has languished this year. What's going on?
There are a lot of factors into it, and I'm not the expert on all of these, but just some observations I have and from what we pick up with groups. There's still a lot of uncertainty about the global economy right now. There's a feeling that we could be entering into recession. That's further complicated by tensions around the world, in the Middle East in particular, and potentially spilling over to other areas. So there's a hesitancy. We see it in a hesitancy in individual investors to invest in copper stocks. We see the copper price not moving up too much. China is not really kicking in and having the demand that everybody anticipated would be there. And it results in a short-term oversupply of copper, which means the copper price is not moving up. But despite that, there's widespread recognition that the fundamentals are very good for copper to move into serious deficit and to see a notable increase of price. We just don't really know when that's going to kick in.
Now, one of the big things in the copper space right this minute is that what's happening in Panama with the Cobre Panama mine. Will it or will it not maintain its contract and its license to operate? One analyst reported this week that if it does lose its contract, then that could wipe out that analyst's expected copper surplus for this year. So the market doesn't seem to be pricing in that possibility yet, which is very different from the super cycle 15 years ago, where the slightest suggestion of an interruption to copper supply at a major mine would spike the price. Why do you think the market's being actually quite calm about the Cobre Panama situation?
My read of the situation on this is that it's a large modern mine. It has such a fundamental impact to the economy of Panama that I think there's a general belief that despite what's going on is that the mine probably won't close. So there's not a widespread belief that it really will close. As we see news come out, it becomes more apparent that it's a more serious possibility of that happening. And so I think if it ever did get to the point where it does look like it will truly close, I would anticipate we'll see that reaction.
Another one of the themes in the copper space this year, Teck Resources and its QB2 Quebrada Blanca DOS construction. In its third quarter results, it reported yet another cost overrun, $600 million this time, which takes the total cost to 8.6 to $8.8 billion. That's a lot of money. Is that scaring investors away from investing in copper projects?
I would say it's probably more making CEOs of major copper miners nervous about committing to developing new projects. And one of the things that we've commented on at this conference, my peers, are that we'd like to do analysis to see, is that representative of all copper projects in the space, or is it something particular about that project that resulted in such serious cost overruns? There's certainly inflationary pressures on cost, and they're rising costs up. But I would be interested to take a look at a couple other recent developments like Quellaveco and Mina Justa in southern Peru. I believe both of those projects came online much more closely in time frame and much more close to original costs. Some overruns, but not so extreme. So I think Quebrada Blanca was a situation where there's a number of factors that conspired to the notable blowout on it. One thing I would point out is that they were constructing right in the heart of COVID. And so that automatically built in some serious delays to the project. And so it's an extreme example, I believe. It's one that's worrisome. It does discourage people from developing large mines. But if more mines aren't being developed, it will only increase the shortage when it comes, which eventually will result in higher prices that motivate people to come in. One thing that you noted on the copper price, right now there are very few new projects. We saw QB2, we saw Quellaveco, we saw Mina Justa, we saw Comoa all come online. We're through that wave right now. Most of those are reaching production. I can't name many more projects that are currently committed to for major copper mine development. And if they're not being talked about and put into production right now, it will be some time before we see an increase in copper production due to new developments. So that's something that I think the world needs to be a little concerned about, because if we don't have more mines being built, and demand will strongly increase, either due to electrification of many aspects of society right now, or everybody focuses on China as being we watch how it decides to utilize copper or not utilize copper. But I think people forget there are other parts of the world that are poised to go through the same transition we saw China go through recently. India's recently announced that they anticipate they'll see the use of copper change from 0.6 kilos per person to 1 kilo per person. That's a 40% increase in copper just in India over a larger population base than China right now. So it doesn't have to be just China. I think as we see other parts of the world continue to develop, the pressure will be there for copper increase to grow. And as an industry, we're simply not delivering enough copper.
I think that's a very interesting statistic, or you mentioned there about India, because it was something similar, I believe, that propelled China's growth in the copper space, of China's consumption in the copper space. I want to interweave a couple of the points you've made there, John. The scarcity of projects that are available to build is one thing, and that's going to be critical at a certain moment in time. But also you mentioned about the nervousness of investors investing in copper projects. Does that mean that investors are also going to be nervous about copper companies buying other projects or buying smaller companies such as Aldebaran?
In many sense, yes, because when you think our business model is to find a project, demonstrate the full size, de-risk it, and sell it to a major miner. When a major miner buys a project from a company like us, they have to be thinking about what we call buy-build. So they're thinking about the cost to buy the project and the cost to build the project. So they're not going to simply buy a project to inventory it on purpose. They have to be thinking that way. So we need a price environment where they're confident it's a good business decision to build that mine, incorporating the risk that it could cost quite a bit more to build a mine right now. So there's a factor calculated that's called the incentive price. It's the price of copper that's necessary for major mining companies to be comfortable it's a good time to build a mine. And that's probably more approaching $5 right now. It's not that mines don't make money unless it's $5, but $5 in today's environment is what I anticipate would be the price we would need to see for miners to be comfortable that despite higher cost to build a mine and despite the cost to buy a project from a group like ourselves, it's good business. And then what we need to see is the game to start. One of the triggers that helps in our space is that if one major mining company makes the decision to buy a project, others feel like it's safer to do it because company X did it, so we can do it. And it kind of triggers, it's a situation where people follow the leader on it going forward. And we don't have that first step really happening just yet. So
I agree with you on the need for a higher incentive price, but personally, I think $5 is still going to be a bit too low, given all the risk and now, as you mentioned earlier, the executive risk involved in a decision. One thing that we haven't touched upon, and I haven't really heard a lot of people talking about, given the increasing cost and therefore risk of building a project, if humanity needs the copper, you could argue it's not a company's responsibility to provide that. The company will provide if it's in the best interest of its shareholders to do so. So at what point do governments need to come in, maybe as a keystone investor, and certainly as helping to permit mines projects? At what point do they need to come in to provide that initial check to give perhaps other investors the confidence that this is going to go ahead, it is going to be funded, so that these projects can get built?
It would certainly be welcome if we saw a government step in and give a check, or perhaps develop infrastructure that facilitates the development of projects. I don't hold out much hope for that. That's pretty tough. Governments are under stress right now with their own economies. But what I do think that would help us a lot in most countries that we work in is that if they would facilitate the process, if they would create a business environment that removes some of the risks. A good example in Argentina right now is that Argentina has not had a mining history in the past, but they have in many ways the same rocks that Chile has next door. And so there are a large number of copper and lithium deposits that have been sitting there for decades, in many cases pretty well known about, waiting for an environment that they could be developed. So what we now see Argentina making it easy for us to explore. It's easy for us to bring money in and spend money there, but it's difficult for us to take money back out to expatriate profits from the country. So what we need is really a change in legislation that guarantees a fiscal environment that we have security that we can make a large investment and recover the cost from that. So it's really more creating the fiscal environment and policies necessary for us to take the risk of spending that large amount of money. And I think they're prepared to do that. They've been carefully listening to all of us working in Argentina, asking what do we need to allow the development of those mines. And with the change of presidency that's undergoing right now, I very much look forward to early next year. I think we'll see some announcements of tax stability agreements, investment agreements that will allow companies to make that decision to develop those mines.
Well, let's hope so. Now, Aldebaran Resources, you're advancing the ALDE project, copper project in San Juan. How has 2023 been for you? How have you advanced the project?
Keep in mind that our seasons are South American seasons now. So we're just starting this field season. We've got 4 rigs going, just started up in the past few weeks. We're well funded. We were fortunate that we raised quite a bit of financing earlier this year, largely based on South 32 as a strategic partner, but also some of our other major shareholders contributing. So we have sufficient funds to have a very aggressive drill program this year. We already have a large resource in hand, but last year we announced some geophysical results that indicated pretty clearly that perhaps we had only partially drilled out the deposit. We have one more field season to go to complete the drill out of the deposit and then put out an updated resource late 2024, and that will lead to our first PEA, the first glimpse of the economic viability of the project in approximately Q1 of 2025. So 3 major milestones coming up, the drill out and the new resource update, the PEA, and the expenditure that we'll make in that will also complete the obligation we have to earn into 80% of the project. So we're very pleased that we can hit all of those milestones in a little over a year from now with funding that we have in hand. So we're in a great position. It's a tough market, but it's a great market to be working in if you have the cash. And I think the results from that work will be better received approximately a year from now in what I anticipate will be a more optimistic market for copper prices.
Sounds like next year is going to be a big year for Aldebaran Resources.
It's going to be a fun year, and it's not just us. It's San Juan is a hopping place right now. There are a number of our peers that have very interesting projects. San Juan and Argentina have a true chance to emerge as a major copper producer coming forward.
Excellent. Well, John, thank you very much for joining us today.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paul.
And this is Paul Harris for Kitco Mining at the Precious Metals Summit in Zurich in Switzerland. And if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe.
Kitco Mining's special coverage of the Precious Metals Summit in Zurich is brought to you by Vizsla Copper.